Today we're going to learn about multiplying decimal numbers. In this video, you will learn how to multiply decimal factors through estimation. You'll learn how to multiply decimal factors by moving the decimal point, and you're going to solve decimal multiplication problems involving real-life situations, such as finding the area of a rectangle. Make sure you have your paper and pencil out because you're going to be copying down some problems that we'll be working on. First, we're going to solve the following problem by estimating. We're going to round these numbers to the nearest whole number. The problem is 8 8/10 multiplied by 12 1/10. We're going to write the 12 1/10 first, multiplied by the 8 8/10. We're going to save that problem because we're going to estimate it to the nearest whole number. When we round to the nearest whole number, that's in the ones place. So we have to look to the right to see what the 1 would tell the 2 to do. Since the 1 is 4 or less, we let the 2 rest. So 12.1 rounded to the nearest whole number is just 12. With 8.8, we're going to look at the number in the ones place, which is 8, to the tenths place, which is 8. Now 8 is 5 or more, so we raise the 8 to a 9. So our estimated problem, once we rounded each number to the nearest whole number, is 12 times 9. And 12 times 9 is 108. That tells us that when we do the exact problem of 12.1 times 8.8, our number is going to be somewhere close to 108. Now we're going to solve the same problem, but we're going to solve it the exact way. So we're actually going to do 8 8/10 times 12 1/10 without rounding. So we'll look back at our original problem. We're going to multiply how we learned how to multiply previously. First, we're going to start in the furthest place to the right, which is 1 times 8, and we get 8. Next, we'll do 8 times 2, which is 16, the 6 days, and we regroup the 1. Next, we'll do 8 times 1, where we get 8, and we have to add the 1, which will give us 9. And even though we're multiplying decimals, we can't forget to add the 0. So we're putting our 0 down here. You can't forget to do that even though we're in decimal numbers. And we'll go ahead with 8 times 1, and we'll get 8. 8 times 2 is 16. We're done with this 1, but we have a new 1. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. And we add those up to find the sum. 8 plus 0 is 8. 6 plus 8 is 14. Regroup the 1. 1 plus 9 is 10, and 10 plus 6 is 16. And 1 plus 9 is 10. So we have our final answer for this problem as 10648. Now, there are two ways that we can figure out where to put our decimal point. The way that I like the best is to look at your estimated answer. When we did our estimate, we got 108. So what we can do is look over at our answer to see where the decimal point could go to make that number close to 108. In this case, the closest number to 108 would be to make it 106 and 48/100ths, because 106 is very close to 108. So that's how we can use our estimate to find our exact answer. Another way that we could do it is to count the decimal places in our problem. So you look at both factors. In the first factor, 12 1/10, we moved over 1 decimal place to get to where the decimal point is. In the second factor, 8 8/10, we moved over 1 decimal place. If you add up how many decimal places you moved over in each of those numbers, we have 1 plus 1 is 2. So in our final answer, we move over 2 decimal places. Let's do another example with the two methods. We're going to estimate, and then we're also going to use the decimal places in our factors to determine where to put the decimal point. So let's start out with the number 1 and 98 times 0.9. So first we're going to round both of our factors. And we're rounding to the nearest whole number, so we're looking at, in this case, the ones place. And we look next door. The 9 would tell the 1 to move up to a 2. And in our second factor, and then when we look at the ones place, we look over to the tenths. The 9 tells the 0 to move up to a 1. So we'll multiply our rounded numbers, and we get 2 times 1 equals 2 as our product. And that is our estimated product, which will tell us that our exact product is going to be something close to 2. Now let's solve the exact answer to see if we get close to our estimate. Let's start by multiplying 8 times 9, where we get 72. Regroup the 7. 9 times 9 is 81, and 81 plus 7 is 88. 9 times 1 is 9, plus 8 is 17. Since we have a 0 here, we don't really have to do anything with it. So we can go ahead. Now if there was another number over here that was not a 0, we would have to multiply using the 0 as a placeholder, but since this is our last number to the left, we don't have to multiply with it. So this 1782 is our final answer. But it's not exactly correct because it doesn't have any decimal points in it, and it is nothing that is close to 2. So what we need to do is look at 2 and determine where can we put our decimal point that's going to give us a number close to 2. In this case, the only way that we can get a number close to 2 from putting a decimal point in this 4-digit number is putting the decimal point in between the 1 and the 7. Because 1 and 782 thousandths will round to 2 if we round it to the nearest whole number. Another way we can do it is by counting the places over. So in the first factor, to get over to the decimal point, we move 2 places. So we're going to write that down, 2 decimal places to the left. And then in the second factor, 9/10, we move over 1 decimal place to the left to get to the decimal point. We have to add those up to see how many places over we go in the final answer. So since we went over 2 places in the first factor and 1 place in the second factor, in our final answer we're going to go over 1, 2, 3 places. So that kind of helps us to double check and make sure our estimate was correct and our decimal point is in the correct place. In the last 2 problems, we've learned 2 ways to place your decimal point. The first one is to place your decimal in your product so it becomes a number very close to your estimated product. The second way is to count the decimal places in each factor. Add them up, and that will tell you how many places over to the left to place your decimal point. That would be like our example where we had 2 places over in the first number and 1 place over in the second factor. So that meant that 2 plus 1 was 3. So we moved our decimal point over 3 places in our final product. Next, we're going to connect to the real world. We're going to multiply decimals to find the area. And in 5th grade, you learned that area is the space that covers square units of a figure. The problem is, Jean is laying tile on a customer's kitchen floor. The width of the kitchen is 11 2/10 feet, and the length of the kitchen is 12 7/10 feet. What is the area of the floor Jean will need to cover with tile? So to find the area, we do the problem length times width. And we know the width is 11.2 and the length is 12.7, so we have to multiply those 2 numbers together to find out how much space on that floor is going to need covered with tile. We know that to find the area, we have to do length times width, which is how to find the area of a rectangle. So we're just going to make sure we write that down. A equals length times width. And in this problem, we had 11.2 times 12.7. Before we do anything, let's go ahead and get our estimated answer. We're going to round to the nearest whole number, which in this case is to the 1's place. And we look at the 10ths place to see what it's going to tell the 1 to do. And the 2 is 4 or less, so we let the 1 rest. So 11.2 simply rounds to 11. And we look at the 7 to tell this 2 what to do. The 7 is 5 or more, so we raise the 2 up one more, and the 2 becomes a 3. So 12.7 rounds to 13. When we multiply 11 times 13, we have 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 1 is 3. Don't forget your 0. 1 times 1 is 1. And 1 times 1 is 1. And we go ahead and add up our partial products. 3 plus 0 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. And we have 1. So our answer is going to be about 143 square feet. So we know that when we do this problem now, our answer will need to be close to 143. So we're going to go ahead and start multiplying our exact answer. We have 2 times 7 is 14. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 1, which is 8. 7 times 1 is 7. Now notice, we're not doing anything with these decimal points until the very end. We can't forget to put our 0 in. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2. And 2 times 1 is 2. Now, this is where some of you get confused because we're moving over now 2 places to get to this 1. So down here, we're going to need to put in 2 zeros. So we are going to have the 0 where the 7 was, and now we're done working with that 2, so we're going to have a 0 where that 2 was. And we're going to start over with the 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. And 1 times 1 is 1. Now we can go ahead and add everything up. 4 plus 0 is 4. 8 plus 4 is 12. And regroup the 1. 1 plus 7 is 8. 8 plus 2 is 10. And 10 plus 2 is 12. Regroup the 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. And then we have our 1 down here. Now, the easiest way to do this is look over at our estimated answer. It was 143. So we need to figure out where we can put the decimal point to where this would be close to 143. And the place where we would put it is in between the two 2's. Because this would be 142 and 24 hundredths, which is fairly close to 143. The other way we can do it is look at our decimal places in our factors. In the first factor, we moved over 1 decimal place to get to the point. In the second factor, we move over 1 decimal place to get to the point. That means we add up the 2, so we move over 2 places in our final answer. So our decimal point goes over 2 decimal places over to the left. So the amount of floor, the square footage of the floor that Jean will need to tile is 142.24, or in 24 hundredths, square feet. To finish up, I want you to solve these 2 problems on your own. Turn your paper over to the back where you have a lot of blank space. Copy these problems down. The first one is 7 1/10 times 5/10. And the second one is 1 78 hundredths times 3 4/10. Make sure you estimate each problem first, solve the estimate, and then solve the exact to make sure your exact answer is close to your estimate. We'll go over these 2 problems tomorrow in class.